Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got some more Aetherdrift spoilers, new combos, new synergies. It's day 2, a slightly smaller day of new spoilers, but nonetheless a few new cards to get into. So let's check out what we got today. First up, we've got Ketos the New Dawn, which is a 3 mana 4/4 and is a legendary creature god with menace, lifelink, and indestructible. So a nice stat line, but it can't attack or block unless there are 7 or more cards in exile. Kind of a downside there. However, it also says whenever one or more cards are put into exile from graveyards and or the battlefield during your turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So a decently powerful ability to be able to draw a card and lose a life every time something's put into exile from the battlefield or the graveyard. There's some really cheap ways and easy ways to do this in Standard that are already available. The Ghost Vacuum can exile a card from your graveyard, your opponent's graveyard. It doesn't say it has to be your opponent's graveyard, so even your own cards you can exile with this. So cards that could blink things could also be interesting, but also removal spells that remove your opponent's creatures. For example, Anoint with Affliction. There's a bunch of white removal spells as well that exile your opponent's creatures, and that will also trigger this last ability. And each time you do that, you will essentially draw a card and lose a life. So you can trigger this multiple times in the same turn. Um, Let's see. And it says only during your turn. Yeah, so you can't do this on your opponent's turn. So you want to make sure if you have like an Anoint Affliction or some spell, you're doing it during your turn. So something to keep in mind when you're using those effects with this card. Also, like the ability to attack or block is not that could take a bit of time to build up to, like in Standard, but in older formats, there's some cards that just exile things for free. For example, Serum Powder, I was thinking about might be quite easy to use in Modern with this. If you have an open hand with Serum Powder, you can just powder it away. It'll exile all those cards, and that'll take care of the 7 card um, requirement for Ketchamoose. So I don't know if that's worth it. Maybe to kind of run a deck with that. I don't know if this card is good enough for Modern, even if it didn't have that requirement, or you have to play a Serum Powder in it. But it does seem powerful for sure. Um, so something to kind of keep in mind with this card, and also as we look through the set, if there's other easy ways to exile cards from graveyards or on the battlefield, then certainly something that would synergize here. Okay, next up we've got the Market Backwalker, kind of like Hanger Backwalker, but it's double X as mana cost. I haven't had one of these cards in a while. It's an artifact creature construct, enters with X +1/+1 counters, 4 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then when it dies, you draw a card for each +1/+1 counter on it. So an interesting kind of variant again of the Hanger Backwalker effect. Instead of giving you tokens or being able to do damage to your opponent, this one draws you extra cards. So still a powerful effect, and kind of really wants you to play this in like a token deck, or sorry, a +1/+1 counter deck mostly, I think, because you really get the biggest benefit from when this dies. So you could play this in sort of like a +1/+1 counter deck with Innkeeper's Talent. There's a lot of green cards that really care about +1/+1 counters. So you could play in that style deck. It also is kind of nice with like Training Grounds, and there's a bunch of other cards like in this set too that we talked about in yesterday's video. You can check out that if you haven't seen that. That are cares about like activated abilities and gives you extra mana for activated abilities. There's that goblin that taps for extra mana for activated abilities only. So this is certainly like a payoff for activated abilities as well. If that becomes a thing, we'll kind of see as the set develops. But it seems like that's a theme here. Agatha's Soul Cauldron, I talked about that a lot yesterday as well. That could be useful with this card. But Training Grounds is really nice because that would reduce the cost of this by 2. Even if you had like a second Training Grounds, that could just make it 1 mana. That'd be quite powerful. Raise the Past could be kind of interesting. Maybe there's some interesting combos with this where you like, because this is actually you can play this for 0 mana and it will just like come into play, maybe trigger an ability to come into play or a death ability, and then it goes straight to the graveyard, and then you can raise the past. It would come back and die again. So maybe there's some raise the past combo with this thing as well. Kind of have to think about that one a little bit more, but that could be interesting just to consider. Also kind of creates like a critical mass of these sort of like 0 mana artifact um, hangerback walker type of cards in older formats as well. So something to consider with some deck building there. Okay, next up we've got the Marauding Mako, which is an uncommon actually. I put this near the front of the slides because I think this card is quite good and one of the best cards I think we've gotten so far for constructed in this set. It's a 1 mana 1/1 shark pirate, so it is a pirate which synergizes with um, other pirate stuff. And it kind of seems like, as we'll talk about the next card too, that the pirates have the sub theme in this set of like discard cards. So it says whenever you discard one or more cards, put them on +1/+1 counters on it, and also has cycling. Cycling is pretty sweet too for 1 drops because sometimes they're not very useful late game, and you can cycle them. Um, and this could go in like a cycling deck, but in standard we kind of have like Fear of Missing Out that could be kind of nice curve. Play this on 1, Fear of Missing Out on 2, put a counter on it, and then Brass's Tunnel Grinder on turn 3. Brass's Tunnel Grinder I think is pretty cool because it lets you just discard any number of cards, so that could put as many +1/+1 counters as you have cards in hand on this thing right away for 3 mana. So that's pretty powerful. And again, kind of the pirates I feel like are getting this sub theme here. So we'll kind of check on that at the end of the set when we get the whole thing, but we'll see how many more enablers they're going to give us for these pirate discard decks. And then Burning Inquiry, kind of again in modern. Faithless Looting is now back in modern, so I think this card could be pretty good in that kind of deck, with like Hollow One and that kind of stuff. So definitely could build up a lot of counters on it if you like Burning Inquiry on turn 2. 2 Burning Inquiries would make this like a 7/7 on turn 2, so that could be pretty good. Like a Burning Inquiry and a Faithless Looting would make it a 6/6. Pretty powerful stuff. So I think this card definitely has some constructed potential. Maybe in older formats where the discard is better, but maybe in standard as well. And then speaking of pirates, we've got the Fearless Swashbuckler, which is a 3 mana 3/3. It's a fish and it's a pirate. What could go wrong? It's got haste, and it says vehicles you control have haste. Okay, nice. And whenever you attack, if a pirate and a vehicle attack this combat, draw 3 cards and discard 2 cards. So again, we're kind of, like I said, we're getting this discard theme. So maybe you want to play these cards in the same deck. This can help you discard extra cards and pump that. We also have quite a few pirates in standard already, like the Captain Storm and other Spyglass Siren, things like that that are pirates that are a decently powerful deck already, and so that could work. I was thinking about the Belligerent, which is a vehicle we have in standard as well, which is kind of like, seems like it's kind of like a pirate vehicle, which would be pretty sweet to give it haste, because when it attacks, you get a treasure, and then you can kind of look at the top card of your library, um, and then you can play lands and cast spells from the top of your library, which is a very powerful effect. And then the Swashbuckler itself could crew the Belligerent. They could attack right away because it has haste. So maybe there's some synergy there. So definitely want to reconsider pirate decks and standard as well with this card. And of course, we're evaluating kind of what vehicles we get and what vehicles we already have in the context of this, because getting that last ability is pretty powerful. A pirate and a vehicle attacking, drawing 3 and discarding 2 is a really good card selection and card advantage. So and triggers kind of the discard effects from the shark stuff. And there was like a 4 mana shark we got yesterday, or a pirate shark, I think, that triggered off of discard effects too. So definitely seeing a pattern here. Okay, next up we've got the Samut, the Driving Force, which is 6 mana, it's green, white, and red card. Human Warrior Cleric Legend. First strike, vigilance, haste, and has start your engine. So we talked about that again in yesterday's video, what that means. And this is an interesting one because it gives your creatures a buff depending on how many speed you have, not just for max speed. So other creatures you control get plus X power, where X is your speed. So it just comes into play right away. By itself would give all your creatures an additional 1 because you start at 1 speed. But if you had pumped it up your speed, that sounds so funny, throughout the game, and you got it up to 3 or 4, then it would give a big buff to your creatures. So that'd be nice with um, token strategies, for example. On its own, it's not that great as a 4/5 first strike vigilance haste. You wouldn't really want to play it just for that. But it also has this last ability, which says non-creature spells you cast cost X less to cast, where X is your speed. So if your speed is 4, it reduces your non-creature spells by 4, which is a huge amount of discount. And if you do that, there are some kind of infinite combos that you could do with this card. For example, in standard, the only one I could think of was like Gilded Lotus and Drafna. Making Gilded Lotus cost only 1 mana would essentially net you 2 mana each time you played it, and Draft could bounce it for 2 mana, so you would get infinite Gilded Lotuses coming into play, and leaving play, and then maybe there's some other. You need maybe a fourth card to actually make that do something. Like whenever an artifact comes in play, it triggers an ability. Um, so there's that's very janky, obviously, but it could be some infinite combo potential in standard. In older formats where Sprout Swarm is legal and modern, I believe, if you reduce Sprout Swarm to by 4, you can buy back it infinite times. So it creates a green sapling, and then you can use that sapling to essentially create another Sprout Swarm, with buyback, and then just go infinite Sprout Swarms. So that's kind of cool. It is 6 mana. I don't know. This card seems just like some fun, like jank combo potential. I don't know if it's all that good in like a token deck either. It kind of seems expensive, but I don't know. I'll reevaluate it when we get the full set and see what other synergies it has. But yeah, that's my ideas so far for Samut. All right, Full Throttle is next. This card with that amazing art. We got the 6 mana sorcery. It says after this main phase, there are 2 additional combat phases. At the beginning of each combat this turn, untap all creatures that attacked this turn. So you essentially get 2 additional combat steps with all your creatures attacking again, because they each will untap during those combat steps. That's a pretty powerful effect. It is 6 mana, which is quite expensive. So I was thinking, like, how could you actually use this in standard? This is any good? It kind of seems janky, but I think it's pretty good with if you can cheat it into play somehow with like Collector's Cage, maybe if you hide away it or use Collector's Cage, because then those kinds of decks, you want to kind of going wide, typically have a lot of attackers, and getting 2 additional combat steps would probably just win you the game instantly. So maybe there's like a white red deck with Collector's Cage and Full Throttle that could be interesting. I was thinking maybe you can copy it with Mercurial Spelldancer, kind of cute, because Mercurial Spelldancer can't be blocked, so you kind of get in every combat step. And if you copy this, I believe you would get 4 additional combat steps, if that's right. So, say if you had put 2 counters on the Spelldancer, you hit them for 2, you cast this for 6, you copy it, right, and then you attack. You could get to attack uh, an additional 4 times. That's 8 more damage just with the Spelldancer. If you had any other creature with evasion, that would get to attack 4 more times. So that could be kind of cool. I don't know. I also thought this kind of slots in well to like the Neoform Velmachus deck in Pioneer. So that if you're not familiar with the deck, it's like you like play a Delve creature that costs 6, and then you Neoform into Velmachus. Velmachus comes into play, and then that deck has like some sorceries that cost 6 that give you extra turns, but Full Throttle kind of gives you essentially 2 additional turns, 2 additional combat steps. So if you hit one of those off the Velmachus, that would be pretty good. You'd get to attack again, trigger its ability again, and kind of keep going that way. So that could be kind of cool. I think that works. I think you're able to, if you cast this during combat, it'll still trigger, I believe, and give you more combat phases. Let me know in the comments below if that's wrong. It is worded a little weird because it says act as main phase. So I'm assuming if you cast this during combat, you would still get additional combat phases. But anyways, yeah, some interesting uses for this potentially. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Full Throttle. I don't. This kind of seemed a little too expensive to be good, but its effect is so powerful that if you can kind of cheat it into play or cast it for free or copy it, maybe it's kind of game winning. So yeah, that's my thoughts there. Okay, next up we've got the Voyager Glide Car, which is a 1 mana vehicle. Kind of rare. I don't think we have many 1 mana vehicles just in general. And it also comes into play and gives you a scry with crew 1, and it says tap 3 other untapped creatures you control until end of turn. The vehicle becomes an artifact creature and gains flying. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. So you could play this in sort of a token deck that goes wide, maybe. That seems okay. That doesn't seem too bad to me. But it is interesting that it's just like a 1 mana vehicle, which is kind of rare. We'll see, I guess, when the full set is revealed, if we get other 1 mana vehicles. So that can be good. There are, yesterday I talked about a 2 mana card that gives your vehicles haste and cruise them right away. So that could be kind of cool to play that after this. Just 1 mana, get in there for 2 right away, scry. But also, we also got another new card, the Cloud Spire Coordinator, which is a 2 mana 3/1. And when it enters, you scry 2, which is nice. So kind of setting up your draws here, and then you can tap it to create X 1/1 colorless pilot creature tokens, where X is the number of mounts and or vehicles that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. The tokens have the token saddles, mounts, and cruise vehicles as though it had power, although its power were 2 or greater. So it can crew basically anything with 3, a crew or a saddle of crew, 3. So that's kind of useful. But I was thinking if you play this guy on turn 2, turn 3, you played a bunch of like 1 mana vehicles, or just this and another mount or something like that, in the same turn, then you could tap it and create 2 of those pilots, which would be kind of nice extra value. Um, so there's some synergy there. It also is again just like a 1 mana vehicle, very cheap way to just tap all your survival cards if you're playing a survival deck. That could be useful. Like even just like Kona could be a nice enabler there for a cheap enabler for Kona combo decks. So yeah, let me know in the comments below if there's other uses for this you're thinking about. But it seems like a decent card for 1 mana. You're kind of getting quite a bit of value, I would say. But again, we'll see in the context of the whole set and the vehicle deck and see how good it is. All right, next up we got Count on Luck, which is a 3 mana enchantment, all red pips here. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile a top card of your library, and you can play that card this turn. So pretty simple, kind of like Phyrexian Arena, but red. Red does get this effect sometimes. Usually it's like 4 mana for most of those cards. So this is kind of interesting and something to note that when it's always like a 1 mana cheaper effect, something to consider. And there are quite a few cards besides just maybe playing this as a sideboard card against control, which could be okay against with a mono red deck. There are a few cards in standard that really want you to play things from exile. So the PNLR, for example, will give you a Thopter. So if you played Pia and then they played this every turn, you're essentially getting an extra card, and you could be generating a Thopter with haste every turn. So that could be kind of cool. So maybe there's some synergy there. It's quite good, potentially maybe in like a Devotion to Red deck in modern or Pioneer. Pioneers, I think I've seen those decks in Pioneer before because it has 3 red pips for Nykthos and Fanatic of Mogus. Um, so you could certainly maybe fit that in there because that deck is kind of like a mid-range deck that wants a lot of red pips, and drawing extra cards would be pretty useful for that deck too. So, um, yeah, some interesting ideas for Count on Luck. And then last up, we've got the Thopter Fabricator, which is a 3 mana vehicle, 4/4 flying, crew 2. It says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact uh, creature token with flying. So it is an artifact, could work with artifact synergies, which is kind of note because there's a lot of artifacts kind of come into play, but you really want to just be triggering this every turn. And looting effects, I think, are kind of sweet with this. If you played like a Kitsa on turn 2, for example, there's other 2 mana looters in standard as well. But if you played that and then you played this on 3 and then you tap the Kitsa right away, you draw your second card and then you get your Thopter right away from this. Um, so that could be kind of cool. And things like opt, it does say on each turn, I believe, draw your second card each turn, not just your turn. So if you drew 2 cards on your opponent's turn, you could get 2 Thopter tokens each turn cycle, essentially. So if you had a bunch of looting effects or opt effects, cheap ways to draw cards at instant speed, that could give you more Thopter tokens. So definitely something to kind of consider with this card. Seems okay. We'll see how many kind of looting effects that are good in standard. That really kind of will determine, I think, the power of this card as well. But yeah, let me know what you think about it. Maybe there's some Thopter synergies as well. That is, I believe, what we have for today. So let me know in the comments what you think about Aetherdrift so far. Are you enjoying the spoilers? Any cool combos or synergies that you're looking forward to trying out? Any decks you want to build? Let me know. I will be covering some more spoilers going forward, all the new kind of interesting combos and synergy ideas that I can think of. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you as well, what you're thinking about. So thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.